Space Marines are here, and we get to see the second codex of this 10th edition. And what does it mean? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek video. I am Phil, the Glacial Geek, and today I'm going to come to you talking about the big elephant in the room, which is the new Space Marines Codex is now up for pre-order. If you're watching this when it first comes out, it might, if you're watching this like weeks later, then it's probably already out and you've seen it or you have it in your hands or whatever. You just want to see what's going on. Either which way, this is, it's big news, not just because the poster boys for Warhammer 40k finally have their codex for this new edition, but because it's a chance for us to see a second codex. We've seen the Tyranid Codex, and now we're getting to see the Space Marine Codex, and we can kind of get an idea, maybe, of what we kind of can expect going forward. And I know that the thing that everyone's going to say is like, oh, codex creep, and that's something that in the past has happened. But I think that this kind of dispels that a little and maybe gives us some hope for how things are going to work in 10th edition. I think that the big thing, the big elephant in the room that everyone's already been talking about is the change to Oath of Moment. So Oath of Moment now only confers a reroll to hit as opposed to a reroll to hit and a reroll to wound. So it's basically the same thing as they had in the patrol detachment, but now you have the or combat patrol, sorry, not patrol detachment, combat patrol. So now you no longer re-roll the wounds, and that's a big change. That's a big deal, and I think that Marines are they're gonna feel it. They're gonna feel that change, and it's something that I think they're gonna have to deal with. And in return, it doesn't feel like they got a whole lot else to make up for it, which is probably going to affect the way that they perform in the current meta, the current competitive meta. I do believe that this change was probably instituted because of the field's bad moments that you had. That even though Space Marines have not been dominating the scene, not been dominating games, not been like the top dog around, a lot of people complained about Oath of Moment, and they complained about the fact that Space Marines now suddenly had access to all these rerolls when no one else has rerolls, which is, a fair assessment, but it was literally one of the things that kept a lot of Space Marine armies even competing well in any kind of meta against most other armies. The fact that they could get rerolls against one unit is tough. I think it's tough. I think it's gonna have a big change on how the Space Marines are going to perform. A lot of my units, like Deathwing Knights, for instance, are very tough and they can stick around, but their strength only goes up to 8, and that means that they can't really have the ability to reliably attack most vehicles or most monsters. And at that point, you're hurting. And you're in a position where those rerolls to wound were what were keeping them kind of competing against all of those things. And it would be interesting to see what effect this has and whether or not this is going to change the way that Space Marine lists are built. I think that GW wants you to have a list that kind of is designed to take all comers, and that you have specific units that are designed to handle armor, specific units that are designed to handle horde, and that you have to bring them all. And that's what they've wanted for a lot of editions, and in this edition they really seem to be pushing it. And with this change to the Oath of Moment, I think that Space Marines now are going to have to specialize a lot more and have units in their lists that are designed specifically for particular tasks. And you're not going to be able to just rely on Space Marines being able to just choose a unit each turn and re-roll the wounds on that thing and then and just take it down. So that's the big change. And with the rest of the codex, there's a minimal changes. Like a lot of the data cards a lot of the data sheets stay the same. There are some that changed a little bit. Sternguard veterans, for instance, now instead of having their shoot again ability once per game, now they have, if they are shooting in, or if they're attacking into your Oath of Moment choice, you can reroll wound rolls of 1. So basically they got a lesser part of the old Oath of Moment as their special rule, as opposed to being able to shoot twice, and presumably if they were shooting into Oath of Moment at the time, shoot twice into Oath of Moment and reroll all wounds. Now they're just rerolling 1s against their Oath of Moment choice, which means that, unless they're going after your Oath of Moment choice, if there's no other units going after something else that you need them to, they get to reroll 1s to wound, which is interesting. I don't think it's quite as effective as their old ability, but especially when paired with the old Oath of Moment. And I think that's going to be something that you're going to hear a lot of, especially from Marine players as they get used to the new Codex, is the loss of that reroll a wound on Oath of Moment is big. And I can't undersell that, how big it's going to be. But along with that, we have gotten a bunch more detachments and abilities. It looks like there's a bunch of them that basically give you each of the doctrines from the Gladius Strike Force just kind of on their own. So for instance, you've got the Stormlance Strike Force, and that's going to be allowing you to advance in charge or fall back in charge, essentially giving you the Assault Doctrine for the whole game, which I think is going to be very strong, and it's probably the one that I'm leaning towards because I like to run the Lion, I like to run Deathwing Knights, and consistently being able to advance them in charge throughout the whole game I think is going to be a big deal. It also gives you the ability to try to advance in charge, to pull yourself onto objectives, to try to steal it away. It feels like a very strong detachment to be able to use that. And then you have stuff like the what was the name? The one for the basically the salamanders there, when you have the Devastator Doctrine, where everything basically becomes assault, so allowing you to advance and shoot with all of your ranged weapons, which is good for positioning. It'll be good for board control. It'll be good for allowing you to make a shooty heavy list, and I see a lot of potential in that list. And if you're shooting them within 12 inches, you get an additional strength, which is super helpful in the high toughness era that we find ourselves with, a lot of vehicles and monsters having those high toughnesses that your guns are going to need a little bit of help shooting and killing. Because of this change, I see, a lot of toughness, like strong toughness lists becoming pretty strong into Marines, because they don't have an answer in and of themselves. They have to have specific units that become easy to pick off at that point, if that's what you've got going on there. So, but a lot of the other things have not really changed. So if you are getting used to what you've got in the index, there's small changes that they've made throughout for some of the data sheets, but not much. A lot of them have stayed the same. A lot of them are similar to what you've got going on there. So honestly, the Marines that you've got now are basically, I would say, a toned down version of what they were with the index. To me, it may not mean that you're not going to, we haven't ascended to the age of Space Marine now. We don't have Space Marines taking over the top field of every single tournament out there. It's not going to be top 10 only being Space Marines, which I think is probably what they wanted. They didn't want that each new codex didn't bring along the new leader in the pack going forward. And looking at the changes that they made in the Tyranid Codex, the changes that they've now made with the Space Marine Codex, it really does feel like maybe these new codexes are not going to have the codex creep that we've kind of grown accustomed to in the past, and that this is going to be a new age of Warhammer, where perhaps that people kind of can expect to be able to have their armies perform at a decent level, which is what we all want, so that everyone can just perform the way they have that there. So honestly, the biggest change with this new codex is what it foretells for the future of codexes coming out in this edition. So Space Marines are, got a little toned down, and honestly, the big change was made, I think, because of the feels bad moments that you get with it, and the feels bad that people have when they get their units just picked off and decimated by a bunch of weak-powered abilities, weak-powered shots that just get to reroll everything into them, and just looking for just weight of fire into them. And it's kind of something that they were trying to get away from, and it looks like they're doing it again with the Space Marines here. So at the end of the day, the big change, I think, is not necessarily to the Space Marines, but the big change is that it indicates a kind of a new direction, I think, with codexes, that you can't just expect them to be the next top thing, and they're not going to be the all-encompassing winner each time you come out with a new codex. So it does mean that you don't have to try to chase the meta. You don't have to keep picking up new armies every time a new codex comes out. But it does mean that it's going to take some getting used to. And I think people are going to have some feelings with their Space Marines as they start playing with the new codex, seeing it going forward, especially until something like the Eldar or get their codexes, when presumably they'll be getting the same treatment going forward. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out, see if this is just a blip, and if Space Marines are just going to struggle this edition, or if they're going to have to change some rules when they do the rules, you know, the balanced data slate in January or whatever they're coming out with it, and see if this actually indicates a change. It'll be interesting to see if it continues, because Tyranid Codex is good, but it's not dominant, and I think that's exactly what they're trying to achieve. And I think that the Space Marine Codex is it's good. I don't think it's dominant, and I think that there is some stuff in there that I've you know, I haven't been able to pry it out quite yet. But at the same time, I think that there's stuff to work with there, and I think that there's play in it that will make him fun to play with. It's just they're not going to be the entirety of the top 10 at every tournament from now on. So that's my thoughts. I know that it's just going up for pre-order now, but I think it's something that, you know, people are going to have to get some used to, and there's going to be some feelings going on. And, you know, anyone who's playing against Space Marines who doesn't care how they do or how their friends are playing with their army are probably going to be happy that they no longer have, you know, full rerolls against themselves. But I think at the end of the day, the Space Marine players themselves are going to have some thoughts on that change, because that's the big one, and that's honestly one of the few big changes that you have here with the Codex coming out. And a lot of the other, you know, the detachments are good. Nothing screams out to me as like the ultimate one. I think it's going to come down to your playstyle. I like the ability to advance and charge, because I hate having my Terminators fall behind. And I hate having the Lion fall behind, but that's very specifically to me and how I play my game and how I make my list. So we'll see how it all turns out going forward with the new Codex, and see if it does indicate something with the next ones that come out after it. So, I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek, as always. And until next time, stay safe and have fun.